I'm the last person that you're going to see lip syncing and dancing on TikTok. I will save you the drama. But today, we're talking about TikTok and the product adoption curve. I'm going to unpack them so you can take the lessons and apply them to your product. Hey everyone, my name's Paul Thompson. I'm on the growth team here at CommandBar. Now the whole point of doing this video is we have this blog post. It's pretty juicy, right? On TikTok and the product growth curve. I'm saving you a little bit of time. I'm giving you the recap of it. So if you want to skip reading the blog post and going through it line by line, tune in. I'm going to take a couple of minutes and I'm going to run you through exactly what you need to know. First of all, I want to set the scene for TikTok. Listen to these numbers. TikTok has 1.08 billion monthly active users worldwide. That's billion with a B. TikTok users spend an average of 45.8 minutes per day on the app. That one's just crazy. 90% of all TikTok users access the app on a daily basis. Boom. I cannot understate how prolific TikTok has become. I mean, you have to be living under a rock if you don't know how huge this company is. But today, we're going to get a little bit nerdy. So the product adoption curve framework was developed by this fancy social science guy named Everett Rogers. He wrote a book called Diffusion of Innovations. That's not important. The important part is we're looking at these two colored lines here. The blue curve is what we call the adoption rate. Now, this is your typical bell curve. We have 5 different stages of groups of people along that adoption curve. They are the innovators, they are the early adopters, the early majority, the late majority, and finally the laggards. The peak is usually at the highest point of adoption rate, typically where the early majority starts adopting. That's generally what we see in these graphs. Tracking over that is the cumulative adoption curve. That's the orange curve. Now, this represents the total number of users that have adopted the product over time. As the blue curve begins to decline, which means fewer new users adopt the product, the orange curve starts to plateau, indicating market saturation. All right, put your textbooks away. Now you understand the graph. Let us break down each of those segments of users, starting with the innovators. The innovators are so crucial to your product success. No matter how difficult you make it or how abrasive or janky your product is, these people will jump into your product like a bull in a china shop. They are going to be loving your app regardless of how difficult you make it to use. Trust me. These people are really the pioneers. They're going to have really tight feedback loops. They're going to be able to give you a lot of data, a lot of user research, and you're going to be able to talk to them to get the most out of what they really want from your product. You may not know this, but TikTok wasn't the first lip-syncing dancing app. Musical.ly was around at the same time too until they acquired it in 2018, I think, for $1 billion. A little bit of short change. And like many early products where the innovators have come in and they are, sharing their feedback prolifically, for TikTok's case, a lot of that early adoption in that innovator wave was actually quite positive. People were really enjoying the product and having a great experience. Another example that I can give as an analogy here is the iPhone. When innovators jumped on the iPhone, we heard nothing but praise. It was just a fantastic device. The execution was flawless. It looked amazing, like something we had never seen before. It was just a joy to use, and we were hearing from all of these innovators. There's murmurs, these mumblings about how amazing the product was. On the other hand, we have the innovators who use Google Glass. Now, on paper, in theory, Google Glass looked fantastic, right? But from the innovator's perspective, there were privacy concerns, there was battery concerns, the use cases were really not that fruitful for using the glasses, and it ended up tanking the product. So going back to what I said before, the innovators can make or break your product. You really need to make sure that you're delivering a great experience for them, that they're having a good time, that their enthusiasm is being kind of fostered and grown, because those innovators are really going to, I would say, push the limits into your early adopter phase, which let's talk about them next. Your early adopters are a little bit more mature than your innovators. They're looking for your product or your app to solve a pressing need or desire that they have in their life. In the case of TikTok, a lot of the early adopters came to grow a social presence, to build their brand, to establish an audience, to create a platform for themselves for a various number of reasons, right? Could have been to run their business, could just be to become an influencer, could be for the social notoriety, whatever it was. But that was kind of the core tenet of what brought the early adopters to the platform of TikTok. Around this time too, you're seeing this impact of the social effects of TikTok with these early adopters in creating these moments of virality. When these early adopters are coming in, there's not a lot of competition, right? If there's someone who's committed to creating content, to being consistent on the platform, to leveraging the app to, its full potential, what's essentially happening there is opportunity to grow exponentially in the kind of ecosystem of the app. That opportunity doesn't present itself as commonly or as prolifically as often as we get into later stages of the adoption curve. So it really, really makes sense for these early adopters to go all in and create as much content as they can to get the juice out of the platform. All that to say is we've got a lot of action in the app. We've got the early adopters using it. They're having a great old time. TikTok is thriving. However, we still haven't managed to reach the early majority phase. Now, if you look at the product adoption curve, we're kind of halfway up the hill here. You see that? And so what we want to do then is answer the question of, all right, then I'm happy we've had the innovators, the early adopters come through. How then do we push things to the limit and get this kind of early majority crew to come on board? Well, for that, you're going to have to cross the chasm. The chasm is the most treacherous zone of the product lifecycle. You may have had experience with this before, and it's a toughie. And see, what happens either side of the chasm is you have this critical inflection point. Your product is either going to be small and useful, fun, okay, or it's going to be large and gigantic. For social apps like TikTok, the social graph can either be a positive thing or it can be detrimental when it comes to crossing the chasm. You see, the way that the app is engineered is pretty straightforward. If you're using an app, TikTok wants you to stay on the app, so they're going to send you content that you like. They're going to suggest content that you will consume more of. They're going to encourage you to create content that's going to help the people in your closest network or audience consume more of the content. It's just this little cycle, right? It just goes round and round and round. So we've got that idea there. Say if I'm a 55-year-old, early retiree person who's just over the hill. And I'm looking at TikTok back a few years ago. I'm seeing all of these kids dancing and lip syncing. There's no way me in my walking frame and my broken hip is going to be out there doing TikTok dances on an app filled with a bunch of kids. And that is the problem that TikTok had to solve, right? How do you break away from that social graph and appeal to the early majority of users? How do you make it make sense for them to come onto the platform? Now, there are a myriad of ways that TikTok has done this, but one of the major ways has been the release of a lot of their creator tools and features. They've made it so easy and quick, effective, and wonderfully powerful to create content on the app and give all their users a set of tools and resources to kind of embody themselves online in a way that no other app had at that point. You needed to be a filmographer or a video editor or a designer to be able to create content that looked fantastic. What TikTok did is they simplified the entire process and they made their creation tools accessible. This drew in a plethora of people. This drew in an audience far wider than TikTok could have ever imagined. And this brings us to the next phase. Thank you, graph here. We are trending now to the late majority phase of TikTok, as you can see. If you look at the numbers according to statistics, I believe that TikTok is in the late majority stage right now. On the product adoption curve, what we are trying to do, if we are TikTok, is we're trying to convince all of these people who have these moral or ethical beliefs of why TikTok is terrible for humanity and why China is spying on us. We're trying to convince them that it's still worth their while to come onto the platform. Usually people in the late majority phase are really resistant to jumping into your product. Together with the early and late majorities, you've really captured the bulk of the available market. From here on out, you're really grinding for low single digits on your adoption curve. Which brings us to the final stage, the Laggards. The Laggards group is quite a low priority group in my opinion. I mean, if you're looking for an example from the TikTok scenario here, the Laggards would be the elderly community who probably don't use social media much, if at all. And you really kind of have to ask yourself the question, if you are going after this group, is it worthwhile? What does this extra, 1%, 2% mean for your product? Is it worth trying to capture that audience and pivot? Or is it worth going back to the drawing board and looking at how you can create new features, new products, and kind of starting the whole process over again with your major market? All right, we have cruised through this article. It was so much quicker doing this than reading it, I know. But if you are a reader and you want to dive in, we go so much deeper in the article, and we have so many other tidbits, company examples, graphs, images, you name it, it's in the blog post. Head to commandbar.com/blog, type in TikTok, it'll pop up. Or it's linked in the description of this video if you're watching it on YouTube at the moment. If you found this recap helpful, let me know. I'd love to hear feedback, and all the best on your product journey. I hope you're hitting that adoption curve and you are on the way up. All right, till next time.